In the summer of 1949, a futuristic-looking aircraft lined up on the runway at Blackbush Airport, a few miles northwest of Farnborough. Only ever intended to be a brief hop, the aircraft took off, climbed to about 20 feet, and then landed straight ahead. The landing was smooth enough, but shortly afterwards the undercarriage collapsed. The satellite was designed by Major Dundas Heenan. Christened John Nelson, Heenan, like so many of his generation, gained his rank during the First World War. After the war he joined the family business, a general engineering company best known for building water break dynamometers and the Blackpool Tower. In 1930 Heenan learned to fly. He also set up an engineering consultancy business with two partners, Heenan, Wynne and Steele. Heenan spent most of the Second World War serving with the British Air Commission in the United States, and it was during this time that he first had thoughts about designing his own aeroplane. Heenan considered that the most likely successful design for a post-war aeroplane would be fast, easy to fly, have a quiet cabin, and capable of carrying 5 people with luggage. He greatly admired the Beechcraft Bonanza, first flown in December 1945, but considered that he could do better. Heenan's aeroplane was to be made from electron, a magnesium alloy with a density 40% less than that of aluminium. Electron was manufactured under license by F.A. Hughes and Company of London. By the late 1940s, Hughes were a wholly owned subsidiary of the Distillers Company Limited, better known for producing Johnnie Walker whiskey and Gordon's gin. Heenan pitched his aeroplane design to the board of Distillers Limited, and perhaps softened up by their own tinctures, they agreed to forming the Planet Aircraft Company. To assist in finalising the design, a mock-up of the forward fuselage was built, with dual controls and a bench seat for 3 behind. Construction of the prototype was entrusted to the Robinson Aeroplane Company of Croydon and took over a year to complete, being first assembled at Red Hill in the summer of 1948. Finished in metallic blue with a red cheat line, the Planet satellite was transported by road to Farnborough in September of the same year. Not surprisingly, the stylish satellite cut quite a dash in austere post-war Britain, and there were high hopes and expectations for its future. A 5-page article appeared in Flight magazine, and thankfully for us, artist Frank Munger produced one of his fabulous drawings. Heenan had designed the aeroplane using electron as a way of cutting down on the number of parts. The wing had a single spar, with a full spar behind to carry ailerons and flaps. Wing ribs were only fitted where the electron sheets butted up to each other. The forward fuselage, including the passenger compartment, was a true monocoque with no stringers whatsoever. Undercarriage and wing loads were transferred through a vertical magnesium keel that ran from the nose wheel to behind the engine. The rear fuselage was also a monocoque with no stringers whatsoever. Fitted with a Y-shaped tail and a pusher propeller, it could be easily removed for engine servicing, and the engine slid back 18 inches at the same time. Control connection was entirely automatic. Cooling air for the 6-cylinder Gypsy Queen engine was provided by a volute fan running on the propeller shaft. The main section of the propeller shaft was a 5-inch diameter magnesium extrusion turned to a thickness of 1/10 of an inch on a gun barrel lathe at the Woolwich Arsenal. All loads from the 2-blade aeromatic propeller were transferred into the rear fuselage by thrust and roller bearings running in an oil bath. After such a successful static debut at Farnborough, publicity material was released and the aeroplane was registered in readiness for a first flight. The test pilot was to be Group Captain Hugh Joseph Wilson, better known as Willie Wilson, who, in 1945, had been the first man to exceed 600 miles an hour in a Gloucester Meteor. He was also chief test pilot at Farnborough. The first test flight, as we know, didn't quite go to plan, but a month later the aeroplane was repaired. Possibly feeling a little bit under pressure, Willie Wilson once again hopped the aeroplane and this time carried out a really smooth landing. Not that it mattered, because the undercarriage collapsed again. At about the same time, this curious story appeared in the national newspapers. Jim Mollison was a Scotsman, a fearless record breaker of the 1930s, and a man with a tremendous thirst. At one time married to Amy Johnson, by the late 1940s, Mollison had probably consumed enough gin and whiskey to have paid for the Planet satellite himself. Unfortunately for Mollison and Wilson, the aeroplane never flew again. After the second undercarriage collapse, it was found that the main magnesium keel had fractured. The aeroplane was transported back to Red Hill, reassembled and sulked in the back of the hangar until broken up in 1958. By the time the Planet project was formally abandoned, a second fuselage had been built and registered. Normally in such circumstances the fuselage would have been scrapped or, like the Helmy Aerogypt, turned into a hen house. However, Major Dundas Heenan had another idea. In 1943, Fred Landgraf designed the Landgraf H-2 helicopter. Single-seat and powered by a British Pobjoy radial engine, the Landgraf helicopter had two rotors on outriggers and Landgraf's own patented tension rod drive system. Blade control was also unusual, each blade being able to rotate about its tubular spar and pitch being controlled by an aileron-like tab set into the trailing edge. In England, Firth Helicopters Limited had obtained rights to build a Landgraf helicopter under licence. Of course, their consulting engineers were Heenan, Wynne and Steele, and a proof-of-concept helicopter was designed around the second unused Planet satellite fuselage. Construction started in 1952 at Thame Aerodrome and was completed the following year. Powered by two Gypsy Major engines mounted side by side in the centre of the fuselage, taxiing and ground trials commenced, but a combination of too much weight and not enough money meant the project was abandoned in 1954. The following year the helicopter was given to the Cranfield College of Aeronautics, where it was later broken up. Planet satellite was Major Heenan's first foray into aircraft design, and he was confident of great success. Might the satellite have been successful if its construction had been more orthodox? History suggests not. Of course, there have been many pusher-configured propeller aircraft, some more successful than others, but often perceived advantage is outweighed by obvious disadvantage. Of course, the Planet satellite was one of the ultra-rare breed of pusher aircraft, with the propeller mounted behind the tail. Few aircraft of this configuration have ever flown, and I offer a short case study. The Cirrus VK-30 was designed in the 1980s by a very competent team of engineers led by the Klappmeier brothers. Just like the Planet satellite, it was a 5-seat aeroplane with an engine around 250 horsepower buried in the mid-fuselage. Development took several years, with most time being spent on propeller, drive shaft and engine overheating issues. Of the 13 aircraft completed, 8 have been lost in accidents, with 14 fatalities. Of course, not all these accidents can be attributed to the design of the aeroplane, but tellingly, the Klappmeier's next design was the Cirrus SR-20 and SR-22. The SR series are far more conventional than the VK-30, and have been hugely successful, with over 10,000 sold since 1999. And what of the Beechcraft Model 35 Bonanza, the aeroplane that was an inspiration to Major Dundas Heenan? Type certified in 1947, the major competitor to the Bonanza was the Cessna 190 and 195. The Cessna was a very good aeroplane, but it was an adaptation of the pre-war Cessna Airmaster, with tailwheel undercarriage and a big radial engine. It was very much the last of the old. By contrast, the Bonanza was the first of the new. It was a very slippery aeroplane and gained a reputation as a doctor killer. Several high-profile accidents, the most notorious happening on the 3rd of February 1959, didn't help the Bonanza's image, but in fairness, these accidents were caused by pilot competence and training, rather than an inherent problem with the design. In 1959, a Model 33 with a conventional tail was introduced. In time, the Model 33 was stretched by 10 inches to become the Model 36. The Bonanza G36 is still in production today, and over 17,000 Bonanzas have been produced in the last 80 years. Thank you for watching.